Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of the Ummahpreneur podcast. Today I have a very special guest. I don't always say that, guys. Cut me some slack, but it's because I only bring you special guests on this podcast. And it is brother Arbazz Nizami, who is actually the CEO and president of Sahaba Initiative, as well as the founder of Muslim Visionaries, two amazing organizations that we're going to talk about today, as well as a few other businesses too. So he's very much a serial entrepreneur. And I'm bringing him on today to share his story, share what inspired him to become an entrepreneur, but also share some golden nuggets about how to build a business, how to grow a business, and some things he's learned along the way. Arbazz, assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to have you on the podcast, brother.
Thank you for having me. And just a little note, so we now have two different roles for president and CEO. So we actually have now a chief executive for Sahaba Initiative, because
Amazing.
we're just growing so much. We're like, we need to expand our team. So.
Amazing, mashallah. That's always a good thing. And you know what? It's actually something I'm a fan of because, you know, sometimes as founders, we always like we kind of tend to think like we have to de facto be the CEO of every single business that we start. But as you start to grow your businesses, you start to realize, you know what, if I want to really stick to doing what I love, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean being CEO of the business. Maybe it's another area, or maybe I'm super into the marketing or super into like the design stuff, or maybe I just want to kind of, you know, have a seat on the board and just kind of, you know, oversee certain things. And so it's always interesting to transition there. But I want to ask you, because entrepreneurs are made, right? They're not born. So you've built these businesses up at a certain point in your life. You decided that you wanted to do something different. So can you share with me a little bit more about your story and the first business you ever built? What was that like and what inspired you to do so?
Yeah, entrepreneurial was a very interesting thing. And, you know, for me, interestingly enough, you know, what really pushed me towards becoming more entrepreneurial in spirit, which I really believe it's more about the spirit, because you have people that are, you know, within companies, people that are CEOs of companies they didn't start, but they're still entrepreneurial. So it's really about your approach to doing things, just the ability to innovate, the ability to look at a lack of resources and say that, hey, I'm going to build resources out of it. So I think it's something that's within your heart. And for me, it really began, you know, listening to Malcolm X. You know, interesting enough, if you listen to, you know, his history and his background and his ability to articulate the importance of being self-reliant, developing things for yourself, and you know, the whole do for self mentality, which is very popular. And that's what really pushed me towards building from scratch, because I saw a lot of, you know, it began by seeing a lot of challenges for some of the Muslim community. It was like, you know, you saw board issues, you had community issues, and you had a lot of gaps and holes. And, you know, there was one approach that I saw that was very common, which was to ultimately sit there and look at everything that's going wrong and find somebody to blame, and then just go home and blame somebody for the rest of the day. And that's one approach. But I believe entrepreneurs, people that have that ability to think about problem solving, they are the ones that need to step up and solve problems and create solutions. So that's where it all began. I mean, listening to Malcolm X's speeches, talking about building, how you can articulate yourself better, how to be more confident, how to communicate, and then ultimately translate that into businesses. One of the interesting things that people don't, I don't think people take into consideration, is that, you know, the Nation of Islam at that time, they also had multiple businesses across the U.S. And I think it's valued, you know, in the millions. They were, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it was somewhere, they were doing around 100 billion in revenue. And for an organization in the 60s to do that, I think it's pretty prolific. They had laundries, they had bakeries, they had different businesses that they were doing, you know, delivery services, things like that. And this was supporting the social side of their efforts, right? They also had a message, which was to change the world, change yourself, and create a culture of social change. But you can't do that if you just think from a nonprofit perspective, in the sense that, you know, everyone's going to be paid a certain level. You're going to generate revenue from charitable donations. No, I think it's really looking at it from a broader perspective.
And so is that what you aim to do with your Sahaba Initiative nonprofit? Is that really kind of what you've set out to do, is kind of create a self-sustaining organization?
Yeah, I mean, that was the goal. So when we started Sahaba Initiative, we all were really we were around 17, 18 years old, which is over a decade ago now, right? And And when we set out to build Sahaba Initiative, I had two paths. I had, at the same time, I had a marketing agency that I was working on, and then I had Sahaba Initiative. And the marketing agency was doing fairly well. But I realized at that point that, I'm also in school. What really connects to me? What's really my purpose and calling? And, the mistake that people make is that they'll look at those two options and say, I'm going to do what's more profitable for me. And anytime I think you do that, you lose your purpose, you're not as passionate, and you end up, ultimately looking down the road and saying, hey, you didn't accomplish much in 10 years besides, you made a whole bunch of money for yourself. And then what ends up happening, you start chasing materialistic things. But if you really truly go after your passion and what you believe in, you're going to do, what speaks to your heart. So at that point, I had this marketing agency and I had Sahaba Initiative, and I said, hey, this marketing agency is making me a whole lot of money, but I'm going to put that to the side and literally just volunteer my time to build up Sahaba Initiative from the grassroots, right? And that involved meeting entrepreneurs, meeting donors, meeting funders, hustling to develop the programs, building teams, finding community connections. The amount of hustle that went into that really helped me in my ultimate business mindset and everything else that I've done after that, because you have very little resources and you're not selling a product, you're selling social change, which is very different. And then when you think about today's age, it's actually more meaningful because everyone is trying to brand their products around social change. So I thought it was very interesting that, at that time, it might not have had that appeal. But through that journey, it taught me what I needed to learn about marketing. It taught me what I need to learn about building a team and all the core elements of a business. And that what ends up happening is people will do something like that, go down the nonprofit route, and they'll go get involved in a community and they'll get burnt out. But the reason people get burnt out is because they're not actually learning from those experiences. So anytime you volunteer for a project, you're dealing with a difficult uncle in the community or whatever, that's an opportunity to understand how to navigate toxic leadership and toxic bosses and how to negotiate. So those are all skills that you can obtain if you think about it from that perspective.
So you told me that you started this, you kind of dropped a hint there that when you were 18. So very much it sounds like this was at an early age and probably at an age where you still hadn't graduated really from any specific university degree. So I'm curious, did you eventually graduate, or no? I'm asking because I'm personally a college dropout. I just decided, I'm going to go all in on business, and I never actually ended up finishing my degree. So I'm curious what it was for you.
Yeah. So no, I didn't drop out. For me, I turned every class that I took into what I need to do in all the other projects. So
right.
And I did my undergrad in public relations communications. So everything I did there, I translated back into the work that I was doing. I went out to do a master's, and I'm finishing a doctorate now. And I'm a big believer in education. I know a lot of entrepreneurs will criticize the whole idea of the college education, but for me, it's to keep my mind sharp and constantly refine my skills. Right now, I'm doing a doctorate because I see in the future there's going to be a challenge when it comes to marketing, where it's oversaturated. Everyone's developing the same type of content, and you need to get deeper in research and understanding how to actually think about things differently to actually set those trends, which is a big skill that's missing in marketing. So I think more education, the better. Even if it's certificates and things like that. But I also push people to just get their degrees, because if you think about it, you don't have to think about it. You can look at the research. The most entrepreneurs out there that have been successful have finished college. They have gone through the whole process. They have done everything. So I think there's, you got to weigh it out. I think some people do hit a cap when you don't educate consistently.
Interesting. And for you specifically, how did you balance going through and completing your degree along with building out what was Sahaba Initiative, your nonprofit right now that we're talking about? So this is a nonprofit. Can you share with our listeners, because just to give them a little bit of familiarity with it, what is a nonprofit dedicated to exactly?
The Sahaba Initiative, we're all about social change. We're impacting the lives of everyday community members. But alongside the work that we're doing, we're providing mental health services, we're providing food, we're providing financial assistance, but we're also helping keep the family unit together, right? Because I don't think change happens. A lot of times, people approach a problem from one perspective. They'll say, "Hey, we need to give people more jobs." But some of the clients that we've been serving, they have 2 to 3 jobs. They don't even have time to seek an education. So, it requires that social element to help people get to the next level. And then you're also creating a community that cares about one another. Um, a lot of opportunities arise out of the nonprofit space. That's where we all connect as human beings. We go to our places of worship, we volunteer, and then we connect with one another. But then I think also when you're in the nonprofit space, you need to connect people to the right people and provide them opportunities to change their life. And that's why it's so critical to have these businesses in the community, to have things that you can plug people into, and help them get the training they need, to succeed.
Hmm. And so tell me this, what is it that inspired you to launch a nonprofit at such an early age?
Interestingly enough, back to the story of Malcolm X, a lot of my thoughts really came around, the social change that Malcolm X had in the world. He had a business side, he had a nonprofit side. So I really looked at that and saw it as a model. I got the extra push uh, from God, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One day I was literally, it was just sitting in the masjid and just, reading Quran and seeing, who comes to the masjid on an afternoon. A lot of the people that come to the masjid on an afternoon are people that are struggling, many people that are converts that have come out of prison. And being in the presence of those people, it just became like an organic thing. People were asking for help, looking for assistance. They were looking for direction in life. And, after helping a handful of people, it just became a thing that, look, we need to actually develop a system because, this is a sign from God. Like, we're here in the masjid and this is happening on a consistent basis. The masjid is struggling to not, they're struggling to have a proper structure to even support themselves. So helping others was not even an option when there's so much conflict. So it was like, we need to develop an institution outside of the masjid to support people. And that's where it came from, I think a lot of things, if you just look around, there's signs always around you.
Got it. For someone listening to this that wants to develop a nonprofit and wants to kind of bring something to fruition, because I've actually spoken to people who essentially come to Ummahpreneur and they're like, I don't want to specifically build a business. I want to actually build a nonprofit organization. I want to help people in need. And it's interestingly enough, we had a conversation like that this week. And so I'm curious for you, as someone who's actually went through the process, how viable is it for someone who hasn't really started yet a business, doesn't have any entrepreneurial experience, to go through that journey? What would you say for you? Is it a feasible matter? And also, what were some of the main steps that you've taken to get there?
Yeah. So for me, I think there's one thing, and this might be a cliche. Sometimes people don't like this term, but a nonprofit is a business in a sense, right? You do have to have business functions. You do have to have systems. You do have to think beyond your heart. And a lot of times people don't want to do that. And it leads to more problems because when you put your emotions first, the nonprofit suffers. And I see this a lot. We talked about founder syndrome, for example, right? A lot of nonprofits struggle with that. Founders come into an organization, they get attached, they don't want to let go. And you can't have one person in charge of everything. You have to start letting everything flow. You have to start building teams. You have to start building structures so everything moves beyond you. Um, so I think when you think of a nonprofit, think of it as a business. You do have to generate a certain amount of revenue every year. And then you have to think about where is that revenue going to come from, uh, and where you're going to invest your money. So for me, starting Sahaba Initiative, social media was big. We just came out of MySpace. We started going into Facebook. So, sharing stories of the work that we're doing, providing opportunities for people to volunteer, looking at who has the most energy. The people that have the most energy in our community are on college campuses. So luckily I was in college then. It was easy to mobilize college students. So integrating all these different pieces are important. I think if you look at just from one angle, you're not going to succeed. So if you're a nonprofit founder, you need to look at the big picture and start thinking of it, about where you're going to plug people in, and then where you're going to ultimately get your money from to sustain the organization.
Right. Definitely. And those are also some important questions to ask yourself, because as you mentioned, I think a lot of people think that when it comes to the nonprofit sector, like, oh, you know what, we'll just rely on donations and then like we'll figure it out as we go. But I think it very much is a business that requires a strategic plan, that requires like very much thoughtful thinking and a thoughtful process behind building out those systems and putting those systems in place that will allow you to function successfully. So I want to ask you this, because you also have been working on a beautiful project, mashallah, which I was looking into recently, Muslim Visionaries, and really helping connect Muslim professionals together so they can network, they can support each other. Tell me more about that. What inspired you to create this kind of community and collective, and what is your aim with this group?
Yeah, Muslim Visionaries really, I mean, it came out of another personal struggle of mine. I think one of the interesting things that happens when you start getting into the I don't want to say hustle culture space, but you get into the hustle mindset after college,
Right.
where you're constantly jumping from one thing to the next. You're trying to grow in your career, trying to get better at things, and that can be very spiritually draining in one sense, right? And then you start thinking about, well, if work is the majority of your life, you need to incorporate your spiritual purpose within your everyday life. And I thought about that for myself. Like, how can I make my everyday and work meaningful? Right. And then I'm thinking, like, okay, well, I'm not only going to work, this is a place of dawah. And it's not the form of dawah where you're calling people to your faith explicitly, but it's where people see your character. They see your faith in action. And you think all throughout Muslim history, the vast majority of people that have come to Islam was through the business marketplace, through the exchange of these goods and services. And you even think about places like the Silk Road, which the Muslims eventually, sort of built their space and their empires through. I don't know if that's the best term, but they started to build their influence through was in these marketplaces. So we're now, as Muslims in the United States and in other places, we're now governed by these corporations. We have all this corporate influences. So why don't we all pool our talents together? Why don't we all get in the same room, share ideas, have platforms, have conferences where we can actually start motivating ourselves to find our spiritual purpose in the workplace? And that's why, I really want to connect Muslim people within their career. We have a lot of um, entrepreneurial connections in the community. We have a lot of space for people that are entrepreneurs to connect, but we don't think about it just from the career perspective, where we have people that are just climbing the corporate ladder, connecting with one another. How can we all better ourselves? How can we learn from one another? How can we train ourselves to be to be better leaders from a faith-based perspective? And then we also think about, DEI as a whole. DEI has become very big in corporate America. What is the Muslim perspective on that, right? Where do Muslims fit in? Many people in the African American community have put forth agendas post George Floyd about what Black professionalism looks like. But what does Muslim professionalism look like, right? It's from a faith-based perspective. What are we asking our corporations to do for us so we can stay motivated to do better at the work that we're doing already every day? And I think that there's no bigger motivator for people in the workplace, for Muslims, than spirituality. And, I think that's a missing question when we talk about the lack of motivation, especially amongst millennials in corporate America.
What would you say to, because I speak to a lot of Muslim professionals. I'll say Ummahpreneur, we help Muslims start businesses and kind of transition into the entrepreneurial space. And I speak to a lot of professionals that are burnt out, that are actually really unhappy with the corporate world right now and the way that it's going. They feel like they don't have time to do their prayers. They feel like they're just limited in terms of like what they can actually control within their lifestyle. And they honestly feel like they don't really have sometimes the same opportunities afforded to them as potentially non-Muslims. For you specifically, as someone who really helps bring these professionals together to try to thrive together, what would you say, to someone like this who's kind of going through and experiencing these challenges within the workplace, and they're feeling like they're kind of fed up, they're not really happy with where they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts to the question. The first
Yeah.
step, you need to get your skills right, right?
Mm.
If you're a Muslim professional, you need to get really good. And the quickest sign that somebody is a leader, when you look at who's a leader in the room, is speaking up. It's to voice your opinions. So when people hear you articulate uh, your beliefs, your viewpoints, your perspectives from a confident approach, you're going to be seen as a leader, whether you like it or not. So you need to have those leadership skills where you command respect when you come into the room, when you can speak with confidence. Those are things that you need to have down. That's very important. And many of the people that I've seen that have, that do complain, that are burned out, they haven't solved that first problem. If they solve their leadership problem, and I know there's a whole lot of terrible leaders out there, and a lot of terrible leaders that are just good at talking. Well, the reality is that is how people look at leadership, right? It's the way you talk. But then you actually have to get into the practice, right? Which is going to outlast everyone else. When you are able to build teams and connect with people on a human level, and not be a toxic leader, people will find value, because the vast majority of corporate America is struggling with empathy, right? At the senior leadership level, there's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of humanity. So when you start to incorporate these things, especially at a time right now where millennials care about these things, Gen Z cares about these things. So if you're in those spaces, this is an opportunity for you to speak up, because they want you out there. Baby boomers are retiring. Many past generations are retiring. They're looking for millennial leaders, but millennials are not seeking those opportunities right now. There's a lack of hope, and there's a lack of push to even go towards these leadership roles. I think stepping up is important. Looking for mentors is very important. Find people that have been in your positions that you want to aspire to be in. People that are 10 years older than you, 5 years older than you. Cling on to them. Ask them about the struggle. And that's something that we're trying to do with Muslim Visionaries, is connect these mentors so they do speak to one another and they can understand, those pivotal little strategic moves that you need to make to get to the top.
Of course, 100%. And I think I agree with you in the first statement that you said, because, a lot of times when you're able to yourself kind of have those skills and have that ability to step up as a leader within your workspace and be recognized for that, some of those problems go away. And I won't say all of them, but I would say some of them go away. And I do agree that if we had more professionals connected with other mentors, having Muslims support other Muslims, that we would be able to solve a lot of those problems. And so what you're doing in Muslim Visionaries is a very beautiful thing, mashallah, and I truly admire it. One thing that I do want to ask you is how you balance it all, because a lot of people think, I always have to choose. I have to choose between the studies or the business. I have to choose between the studies or, this other hobby or project that I want to do. So how do you balance that? You're pursuing a doctorate, mashallah, as well as running Sahaba Initiative, Muslim Visionaries, and you even have a few other businesses on the side. What's your secret?
It's all about systems, right? I think the more systems that you have in place, the better you're going to do things. I think one of the things that happens, it's one of the reasons I took a master's in organizational change and my doctorate, is that I need to get more organized, right? And you look at any people that have been successful throughout history, they've been more organized, not more in number. I think a lot of times we cling on to this idea that we just need more of us. We just need more people, that we just need more, of everything. No, you don't need more. You need more strategy, you need more organization. And you'll see that even the smallest of ideas can change the world, right? If you're organized and strategic about what you do. And we've seen this enough in the last 10 years, all these disruptive organizations that have come into place. You think about even just some of these tech companies that have started off as small apps and that have grown. It's organization, it's being strategic. So any person that wants to do a lot, they need to be very strategic with their time. They need to be organized. One thing that I will say that I dropped very young, back in high school, I dropped television. I dropped most, I don't watch TV, music, a lot of those things that people like to do. And then I do hustle on the weekends a lot. So it is a lifestyle choice. And people say, you got basketball, you have football, you have all these sports. Being an entrepreneur, being a leader, it is also a sport in that sense, where you're constantly practicing, you're constantly getting better, you're constantly conditioning, you're also taking breaks during the summer. So you have to look at it from that perspective, which sometimes from my experience, sometimes in the Muslim community, we tend to be very giving, akhirah focused, and we just have to keep giving. But if you don't take care of yourself and be strategic about how you develop yourself, then you're going to actually lose yourself in the process.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, 100%. I think that was very insightful. What are 3 tips that you can give us, actionable tips for anyone listening to this who wants to bring more organization and who wants to bring more systems into their lives and really kind of bring more structure into everything that they do? Is there 3 tips that you can share with us today?
3 tips. Yeah, that's hard. I think the first, I think the first thing that you need to do is be very thoughtful about what you want to accomplish in the day. I think what ends up happening, we're right now with the new year, everyone writes their goals for the day, for the year, and they don't think about what's going to happen in the next month and next week. So you should be very strategic about what you're going to accomplish in the next day, in the next week, and the next month. And it doesn't have to be so super complicated. Everyone wants to have an app and have all these crazy Excel sheets. No, just have a piece of paper, write down what you're going to do, and then move on, right? So I think that's very important. Number 2, like I mentioned, systems for everything that you're going to do. Look at ways that you can offshoot some of the things that you don't need to do yourself, right? If you're somebody that's going to be the visionary or someone that's building big things, you need to find people that can take on some of the extra roles. And many times we don't want to pay for it. We say that, hey, we can do it ourselves. That's the surest way to lose. What ends up happening when you build a project and you do everything yourself, you get stuck at a certain level. It's usually level 1. And if you want to scale, you need to pass on what someone else can do, and then you focus on the growth of the organization or project. So that's very important to hire the right people, to find the right people around you. And then number 3, find, I don't want to say life coach, find a mentor or a coach or somebody that can hold you accountable. You need accountability partners. You need someone there that's checking in and can see from the outside what's going on with you. Because sometimes you get exhausted, you're not paying attention, and you get sloppy, right? Everyone needs a trainer. The other day I was listening to a video by a guy named, I think his name is Jim Stover. I don't know if you might have heard of him. He trained Kobe. Man, people don't know that, Kobe had trainers around him. He had people around him.
Yeah, Jim Grover.
Jim Grover, yeah. He also trained Jordan. So you have these people that, are amazing athletes, but they didn't do it on their own. They had coaches, they had guides, they talked to people. You can't do it on your own.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I want to ask you, if there's one thing, this is a kind of a more, I would say like a more high level question, but I am curious for someone like yourself who's working on multiple businesses, multiple initiatives, mashallah, if there is one thing that you could be remembered for, right? And this is something that I feel like as Muslims, when we start a business, when we're building something, I think a lot of it comes through the intentions that we have. And I'm curious for you, if there's one thing that you could be remembered for that you are seeking to accomplish, inshallah, in this lifetime, kind of leaving that mark on this earth, for you, what would it be? What would you want to be remembered for?
I think for me, the one thing I do want to be remembered for is pushing people to aspire higher. I think we have many people in our community that tell you can't do it, it's not enough, everything it's too difficult, I don't want to be that person. I want to tell people that they can live their dreams, they can build a vision, not for themselves. It's not about making money, right? It's about building opportunities for other people, for the Muslim community, for your akhirah, right? So I think every organization, anybody that's involved in anything, think beyond what you're doing right now and think about building for a long term. If you're in a youth group, don't live in your youth group for the next 10 years, which some people do, right? Think about where you can take it to the next level, what it can visualize, where it can be. So when I think about what I want to be remembered for, is to push people to, aspire to greater heights in the community.
May Allah grant you success in that and barakah in that mission, brother. It's a beautiful mission to have, mashallah. Brother, how can people connect with you, stay in touch, be part of Muslim Visionaries, support you with your nonprofit initiative, and really just kind of, stay in touch with you overall?
Yeah, so I'm super accessible. I respond to messages all the time. I'm not one of those people that doesn't have time for people. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Arbazz, on there. On Instagram, I'm also there. I have a YouTube channel. But if you want to get involved with Muslim Visionaries, it's just muslimvisionaries.org. Sign up for our newsletter, and we'll keep you posted about our next upcoming events. We have a few interesting things that are going to happen in Southern California, inshallah. So inshallah, we'll keep you all engaged.
All right. We'll make sure to drop those links in the description and in the episode notes as well. Whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, check that out and make sure to connect with Brother Arbazz and follow him on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all these other platforms, inshallah. Arbazz, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really pleasure of a conversation. I enjoyed it very much, and I appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Assalamu alaikum.